Hello everyone. So in this video, we will learn about how to make graphs on STATA. And this is going to be one long video, which can cover the whole assignment. I'll be using, because there are different graphs and I would need to use different types of data. So I'll be using, data provided by STATA to actually make the graphs. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a data set, which is an automobile data set, which has these variables, which has the make of the car, the price of the car, the miles per gallon of the car, and all that. So let's suppose if I want to use the first graph that we want to create is a scatter plot of two variables, which is the miles per gallon and weight. So that's going to be, so the command for that is going to be scatter, and you will type in your first variable and you type in the second variable and you just press enter, and that will actually give you the scatter plot here. So that's the scatter plot that you will see. Now just a quick deviation from here, from the assignment. Now this is the standard graph that you see, but if you want to make changes to your graph, something that we learned in the book chapter as well, like you want to make the graph look more appealing, there is this button here called graph editor. So you click on that, and what you can do is you can actually change the graph. So I can pretty much change the background, let's say to white. I can change the color of the dots, I can change the grid lines, I can change the axis, I can change the way the numbering is. So I can pretty much change a lot of things. And then save the graph later. So that's a quick, nice way to make the graph more appealing. You can also add the title to the graph here. So there's that. All right, moving on to the next thing, which is how do you create scatter plot for three variables? Well, it's simple. You just add the third variable next to it. So you're going to say scatter and the three variables that you want to use the scatter plot for. So, that will actually give you the three variables, where two variables are where the third dimension is actually being used using colors. You don't always have to use colors. You can always use shapes as well. And again, you use the graph editor to change that. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which is, let's suppose if you want to create a scatter plot for a certain number of observations, and you also want to label each dot. So the command for that is fairly simple again. So you say scatter and the name of the variables that you want to create a scatter plot on. And then let's suppose I ask you to create a scatter plot for the first 20 observations. So you say in 1 by 20. So that will actually create a scatter plot for the first 20 observations. And then you press a comma, and this is where you tell what's going to be the label of each dot. So the command for that is mlabel. And then in here, you actually specify the variable which actually carries the information about the label. So let's suppose I want to label each dot by price. So I will just put in price here, and I will close the parenthesis and I press enter. So that will actually, label each dot for me. So that's how I'm actually adding a third dimension to the graph. So there's that. Now moving on to the next one, which is adding a third dimension using the size of the bubble. So let's suppose if I ask you to create a scatter plot of two variables. So those two variables can be anything. So I can say scatter. Let's suppose I want to keep the same ones, which is miles per gallon and weight. And I want to add a third variable indicating the size of the bubble or of the dot. So to invoke that, you have to invoke this parenthesis and say w equals to. So w actually means the weight, which is the third variable, and you will specify the variable which will determine the size of the size of the dot here. So I can give the size of the dot as something like, weight here, or, I can give length, whichever variable that I want to give. I close the parenthesis, and then I also have to specify, how should the dot look like? Should it look like a circle, a square, a hollow circle. So we're gonna make it look like a hollow circle, but you can actually have many options in there. So I'm gonna make it look like a hollow circle. So I'm gonna say M symbol, and in here I'm gonna say circle hollow. So that's how I'm gonna make it look like, and you press enter. So that actually gives you a three-dimensional plot where the size of the bubble is actually the third dimension. So here's this graph. Now moving on. So moving on to the next one, which is a line graph. So a line graph is another type of graph, which is not the scatter plot. So in line graph, you actually you do line graphs to see trends in things. So I'm going to move on to a different type of data set here because to see the trends you actually need a time variable. So I'm going to change the data set. So I'm going to do clear all, and I'm going to use some other data set. So let's suppose we use this data set, which is US life experience. So we get this data set, and let's suppose if I want to create a line graph of two variables. So that's simple. You press line and you type in the two variables. So let's suppose the variable I want is life expectancy of males and the year variable. So that will actually give me the life expectancy of males according to the year. So that's the trend here. So you could see that in the World War I, the life expectancy of males dropped significantly, and the same was with the World War II, but it has been pretty consistent throughout. So that's there. Now let's move on to another one, which is a pie graph. So let's create a pie chart. So to create a pie chart, again, it's a fairly simple process with STATA. So let's create a pie chart. So to create a pie chart, again, I'm going to use maybe a different data set. So I can use like the census data set, which I probably assume it's in the assignment as well. So let's suppose if I want to create a pie chart. So a pie chart has typically two variables. So let's suppose I want to create a pie chart of population with respect to region. So the code for that is going to be graph pie, and then I will type in the variable on which I want to create my pie chart. So I'm going to say population, and then I'm going to have a variable called over after comma, wherein I will actually specify the groups on which I want to have the pie chart. So that should reflect your groups. So in here, I'm going to talk about region variable, and I press enter. That actually gives me the pie chart for Northeast, North Central, South, and West, whichever was in the data. So that actually gives me the pie chart here. Now let's suppose if in this particular pie chart, I want to also specify I want to add the labels as well. I mean, if let's suppose I want to add the labels, then the code is again pretty simple. I use the same code, but I use I invoke this command for p label, and I can invoke what label I want to have in there. So let's suppose if I want to add the names of the groups as well in the graph. So I can say please include all names, and what that will do is I will actually add the names to the pie chart as well. So there are a lot of different options that you can have. Now you must be thinking, how can I get access to these options? With STATA, there is this one command called help, and if you just type in the command help, and you type in the command that you need help with. So let's suppose I need help with line charts. So you can say help line, and that will actually open up all the options with line. So you can actually know what all different options I have and what all different ways I can actually create line charts. But I'm not going to get into this right now. Let's just keep things simple. So moving on to the next one. So pie charts also have an explode option. So by explode, I mean, you want to possibly exclude a particular pie outside, so you want to disassociate a pie with the rest of the pies. So to create that, to actually use the explode option. So you type in your original command that you have, and then you type in pi, and then you type in the pi that you want to explode. So typically there are always, so for, let's suppose in this case we had 4 pies. So what I can say is I can say make pi 1 explode, and then make pi 2 explode, and then let's say make pi 3 explode, and let's not make the pi 4 explode. So I just press enter, and what that will do is it'll actually break down the pies here, right? So all the pies got exploded. By exploded I mean they got separated from each other. And if I run this command again by invoking, hey, don't keep pi 3 and 4 together, but explode pi 1 and 2, so that will actually keep these pies together, and then it will actually separate out the other pies. And let's suppose you want to label a pie, so you can do that too, which is something that we learned in the last command. So if I want to label this pie, I can just use a p label, and I can either label the name, or I can also label the percentage values. So let's suppose please label pi 2 with percentage values, and if I do that, I press enter, that actually labels pi 2 with the percentage values. You can add mean values, you can add other values to it. Again, you can use the graph editor here to actually change everything about a pie. You can change its color, you can change its intensity, you can change how it's shown here, you can change the background, you can pretty much change anything. You can add the title too. So that actually allows you to customize the graph accordingly. Now let's move on. Let's go to bar charts. So bar charts again are famous charts which are used. So let's move on. So now let's suppose if I want to create a bar chart of some variables. So I'm going to change my data here. So I'm going to use the CD temperature data. Again, all these data sets are standard data sets. I mean, these are just for instructional purposes. Of course, you'll have your own data sets. So let's suppose I want to create a bar graph. So the code for that is graph bar, and then you'd kind of type the variables that you want to create your graphs on. And bar graphs are typically graphs with 2 variables. So one variable is always a categorical variable, and one variable is a continuous variable. So you type the variable that you want to create a bar graph on. So let's suppose I want to create a bar graph on temperature January, right? So that's the variable in here, and I want to classify it over region, right? So that's how you create a bar graph. So that's actually going to give you temperatures across different regions. And again, you can add multiple variables to that. So basically, I can also add temperature January. I can also add temperature July. And if I press enter, it's actually going to give me a different, a multi-dimensional bar graph here. Now, this is actually a vertical graph. Now let's suppose I want to create a horizontal bar graph with exactly the same information. So the code remains exactly the same, but instead of bar, you actually type in h bar. So that would actually make it a horizontal bar graph. So, that just changes the orientation. Sometimes that's useful to actually show to your audience. So you can do that. Again, you can click on graph editor and you can make any changes that you want to the graph to make it look appealing to your audience. Okay, so now we are going to create histograms. Now histograms are graphs for single variables, so you can actually see the distribution. So let's suppose I want to see the distribution of a variable called temp jan. So how can you create a histogram? So that's simple. I can just type hist or histogram, and I can just type in the name of the variable. Let's suppose temperature jan, and I press enter. That would actually create a histogram. So you can actually see the distribution of it. Now let's suppose I want to draw out the distribution. I want to connect, all the centers of these buildings, and I want to create a distribution out of it. So the code for that is it's pretty simple. It's actually called I suppose K density. Uh, so the code for that is type in the same the same command, and if I want to add the distribution to it, so you type in frequency K density, and what that will actually do is that will actually draw out the distribution, so that you know what the distribution looks like. So it looks like a bimodal distribution, where you have two spikes, which is not exactly a normal distribution, but it appears that it's normal or not. Okay, so that's there. Now, as of now, we've just covered like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to graphs with STATA, but I believe that's enough for an assignment. But I think you can now get started and start exploring different types of graphs. You can always type in help and type in the command that you want to know more about. So let's suppose I want to know more about histogram. So help hist. You press enter. That actually gives you this document where you can know how do you want to create these graphs, what options do you have, and it also gives you examples as well, right? So there's that. Okay, so that's there. Now another thing about STATA is that you don't always have to rely on commands. You can always go to graphics here, and then you can see that you've got these different options here. I'm more of a command person, so I tend to stick to commands. But you can always, let's suppose if you want to create a bar chart, so you can always go to graphics and say, I want to create a bar chart, and then it will actually give you this information. So what do you want to create a bar chart on? So you can have your variable in here, and you want it to be vertical or horizontal, what kind of information that you want to have here, and it would actually automatically do the command for you. So that's how you can actually create bar charts or other types of charts. So there is this graphics option here, and you got bar chart, dot chart, pie chart, histogram, and all different types of graphs that you can actually create using STATA. Pretty much you can create any graph on STATA, so there is no limit to that. But these are the mostly used graphs that are out there. I hope it helps, guys. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in class.